we're running.
Yes, yes.
Last Monday, America had the big astronomy party, solar eclipse, which is, of course, a wonderful sight, and many millions of Americans were able to watch it. But also many Americans thought that it's some kind of sign. I'll be talking about that with Dr. Ben in this episode of the Global Atheist. Oh, there we are. We'll do that again. America had the opportunity to look at the solar eclipse last Monday. Many Americans did. Some Americans saw a sign in it that the end of the world is near. Well, that didn't happen. And I'll talk about that with Dr. Ben in this episode of the Global Atheist. Hello, Dr. Ben, and welcome to the episode.
I'm glad to be here. Good to see you.
Great. What was your experience with the eclipse?
What was my experience with it?
Yeah.
I stayed here in South Carolina. I did not fight the traffic or the crowds. I got about 80% of the eclipse, and I certainly hung out with my friends in the backyard, and we watched it. It was more fun, since we're going to talk about superstition and things like that. It was more fun to actually go inside periodically and look at my TV and watch the eclipse occur in Mexico, and then move into Texas, and then move across Illinois and all that. And so I got to watch totality on the television probably about 6 times over, as I would go outside and look at the eclipse, in real time. The thing that makes that interesting, and the reason I bring up superstition, is that was a clear indication that the world is not flat. So the flat earthers could just look at that and know immediately that if this eclipse is occurring at different times in different places, that's a curved earth. There is no way that you could look at flat earth and expect that to happen.
I watched I watched the NASA stream of the eclipse, and they did that quite nicely, I must admit, and had a good view wherever the weather worked well together with us, and it was quite nice. I've never seen let's say directly the eclipse sun. In 1999, I went to France for the August 11 eclipse there, and unfortunately I was completely clouded out and it was raining.
Yeah, that unfortunately happens a lot. I finally got to a point in my life where I could get a really nice telescope, and I rarely take it out, because every night I want to go out and go stargazing, it's cloudy. The weather just sucks when you try to do astronomy.
Yep,
especially if you're counting on it.
Yeah, and last winter, I don't have a good telescope at the moment, but I have a good pair of binoculars, which for a starry night can be very nice.
Depending on what you're trying to do, binoculars are the actual solution to the problem. Telescopes are great for looking at individual items, particularly if you know where they are in the sky. They're not real good for surveying large swaths of area.
Exactly. But anyway, I like to do that. But last winter and pretty much last year, very, very cloudy skies, lots of rain, clear nights, hardly any. So it was not a good year in that respect. But occasionally, as you can see here, this is my own picture of the moon, made a few years ago, just from my balcony using a camera and a telelens.
That's a good picture. I thought it was professional. I didn't realize you'd done it yourself.
Yeah, that's DIY. So that's a good result. It's a stack of, I think, something like 20 exposures.
And back to the flat earthers for a minute, just because I seem to be locked onto that right now. You know that picture would be upside down if you were in Australia.
Yeah.
Another thing that you can't do with the flat Earth.
No. I've been in Australia, and yes, I've seen exactly that.
One of these days, maybe I'll get there.
I wouldn't mind going there again. I much enjoyed myself there.
It seems really nice. Australia seems like one of those places that if I actually went there, I might not ever come back. So I'm a little afraid to go there.
I was there in 1998 for work, and had quite some time to get out and watch the sky. I was in Sydney, I must admit, which is terribly light polluted. But
That's nice, though. That's nice when your work sends you there and you've actually got free time.
Yeah.
The closest thing I got to that was South Korea. I got to spend 2 weeks in South Korea. And I didn't have a lot of time during the day. I had a couple of weekends there. That was nice. But most of it, I just went out and walked around at night, that kind of thing. And that was really very different. I was amazed at how clean and orderly everything was in Asia as opposed to the United States.
Yeah. Anyway.
Certainly wasn't. Nobody was worried about walking around at midnight or something in South Korea. Whole families would be out walking through the park, thinking anything twice about it.
Almaton Darrow asked a question. I saw people saying the eclipse proves the sun and the moon are local. How would that work? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I'm not sure I understand it either. I was pondering that. I'm not sure why you would think that would be a requirement. I mean, it could be that they're local. You could come up with a scenario where that would work, but there's just as many scenarios where they don't have to be local. So I'm not sure why somebody would even think that would be some sort of requirement or some sort of proof of anything.
I mean, yes, eclipses tell us quite a bit about the how do you say that, relationships in sizes and masses and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. Now it is quite the coincidence that the moon and the sun have the same angular size, the same apparent size, but that's because the moon is effectively, let's see, what is it, 240,000 miles compared to 93 million miles?
Yeah.
So that's a factor of what, 400?
400.
Yeah, so it turns out the diameter of the moon is exactly 1/400th, the ratio of the distances. So apparent size is the same.
And even that doesn't always fit. We have annular eclipses because the moon doesn't fit in certain, particularly when it's winter. Because the moon is in apogee, and so angle is a bit smaller and it won't fit.
There you go. That's a good comment.
Do you want? Oh, sorry, I've missed that. Do you want to see feathers that squirm? Ask them to calculate and predict when the next one will occur. Yes, that's an excellent one.
It's just a funny thing, that people get hung up on this stuff, and it's the internet. And now, see, that's a favorite rant of mine. It's like when the internet first became a thing, say back in the late 90s, I was so optimistic. I thought we'd all learn to use the internet to get smarter. We'd all have intelligent conversations, and then I discovered social media and learned something about human nature that I would rather not have learned, which is, let's take whatever good technology is offered to us and make the worst of it, not the best.
Yeah. Yes, unfortunately, I've never touched Earthers much. As luck would have it, our last episode, we talked about flat eartherism and all stuff of that with a man who knows quite a bit about that and goes into discussion with them. I have not enough patience for that.
I understand.
It's incredibly silly. I don't know exactly. I mean, apart from the people for whom it's just a grift, I don't understand why people believe that silliness.
I view a lot of what goes on the internet and social media in particular as everybody wants attention, everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame, and they are happy to do whatever they have to do, including come across as incredibly stupid for that 15 minutes of fame and that attention. I of course went at it a different way. I actually went to college and tried to learn something so that I was worthy of people's attention.
Yeah.
If I had something to say. And so, and again, I don't try to be an expert on everything, so I don't have an opinion about, whatever, like some people do. You want to have a discussion about physics, I'm more than happy to have that discussion with you. But if you want to talk about psychology, I'm going to send you to my wife because she's the expert on that.
Yeah.
I don't have to pontificate about everything. And there are some of these people that feel like they do. And
Yeah,
I would
but
say you should instantly distrust anybody that thinks they have an answer for everything.
yep, I agree. That probably most of it is bullshit.
Oh yeah.
No.
I'm waiting for you to ask me about astrology so that I can start on some sort of rant about that.
Unfortunately, I know very little of astrology. When I was in secondary school, and I was already quite knowledgeable about astronomy, at least amateur level, everyday astronomy. I was a member of an astronomy club. I went several weekends with the astronomy club to a very secluded bit of heath where you could have brilliantly dark skies, which one they had,
Right.
by the way, were very cold.
I miss the Milky Way galaxy. I don't live in a highly densely populated part of the country, but yet I haven't seen the Milky Way galaxy in years,
Neither
other
have I.
than on television.
Yeah, neither have I. I mean, where I live, Rotterdam, is terribly light polluted. It's slightly improving, but the big thing is something like 20 kilometers out of the city, there's quite a large bit of agricultural land that has warehouses on them that are being lit day and night. And so the sky that way is orange all night.
Yep. Unfortunately, I've had way too much experience with that too. When I first moved to South Carolina, I had a lovely house. It was out in a little town called Greenwood. It wasn't on the lake, but there was a lake there, and I had a house, one step back from the lake. I couldn't afford lakefront property as a professor, but it was gorgeous. And when I moved there in 1994, but there was a film plant, Fuji, as I recall, that was expanding, and they put all these sodium. I had about a year. That was the last time I actually could really see the Milky Way. And they expanded the plant, and they put all these sodium vapor lamps in the parking lots. And it's like it was gone. I mean, I had a gorgeous view of the night sky for about a year when I first moved to South Carolina, and then all it took was one plant to decide to expand, and one manager to decide to put sodium vapor lamps in because it was cheaper than other options, and then view was gone.
Yeah, it's terrible. Anyway, well, we were about astrology at that time. A girl I did hang out with occasionally heard that I was a member of an astronomy club, and immediately heard astrology. And so she was a bit surprised when I took her to one of the club evenings and showed her well, bits of the sky, as luck would have it, was quite a nice, clear sky, and that was not what she expected. We were not making what you call them, the diagrams with which to predict your future.
Uh-huh.
It has a word which I can't remember at the moment. And we weren't talking about the star signs like she was used to, so she was disappointed.
I understand. And it's funny, this astrology thing just won't die. Chemistry had alchemy, and nobody seriously takes alchemy as a subject to talk about. Ironically, scientists have turned lead into gold, or gold into lead. Lead into gold's what everybody wanted to do, so let's stick with that. It took nuclear physics, of course, to do that, and it was trace amounts of it. It's not like you could do a large volume of it, but from that point of view, alchemy has had more success than astrology has. But yet, you still see astrological columns in every newspaper. Newspaper, what's that? Yeah, but
okay, yeah, but
even online, I guess they still do it because people still talk about it, and I have no idea why. It's never been proven to actually predict the first damn thing, and yet people still talk about it. And I guess it's kind of like the social media thing. I guess they do it because they find it entertaining, but they don't really expect real answers from it. They expect scientists to give them the real answers.
Yeah, that's how I understand at least the horoscope in the newspaper. They are there for entertainment. I don't think anybody takes them seriously.
Now, the one thing about astrology that sort of gives it an in, I think, even in the modern day, is there are the signs of the zodiac, and they really do have meaning in astronomy. They are really constellations in the night sky. So they're really they're constellations that you can learn and look at. And they have meaning in the sense that they trace out the orbital plane of the solar system. So those are the constellations that if you were wondering where to look for planets, other planets or things like that that would be in the orbital plane of the solar system, those are the constellations that you need to know and be familiar with. But of course, none of that rules your destiny. None of that changes your destiny. My astronomy professor many years ago told me that it's simple math. If the logic is it's the gravity of the planets that affect your destiny when you're born, right? Because it's all based on your birth date. Then a garbage truck passing in front of the hospital is going to screw you up for life. So there's nothing to it other than people just find it entertaining.
Exactly, and I mean, I know that people took astrology seriously well into modern times. For instance, Copernicus, he wasn't just an astronomer, he was also an astrologer. He made money from that.
Right. Well, and again, I mean, Newton was into alchemy. So Newton came after Copernicus. And so,
they were those weren't stupid people, and they had possibly wrong, but reasons to believe that what they, in case of Newton, what he was doing with gravity was on the same level as what he was trying to do in alchemy.
Right.
And he didn't have the experience we have now.
That's correct.
The knowledge we have.
We all have a framework that we start from. And, it's funny, because it's like the whole, this was a social media thing, right? Question everything. You can't question everything. It's a big universe out there. You're born, you're wandering around as a child, you're interacting with the world, you're trying to learn how the world works, and your parents are probably going to set the tone for you as far as what your assumptions are for most of your life. I mean, it takes a very special person to grow up, say for the first 15 years of their life, based and taken all of the things that their parents have told them to do and not to do and to take for granted. Religion comes to mind, right? It takes a very special person to take that 15 years of programming and then reject it and then say, that's bullshit. What mom and dad told me, I'm sure they meant well, but what they told me doesn't really fit with my observations, my own observations as I grow older as a human being. But everybody has to have starting assumptions.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's the starting assumptions. And it's true for Newton and Copernicus and everyone else that's ever lived.
Yeah. And will be the fact well into the future. I mean, with a bit of luck, we will keep on learning more and apply that wider and perhaps get rid of a bit of the ignorance, but it won't go
It's
away.
amazing how certain bits of ignorance hang on for much
Mhm.
longer than you could ever predict. And there's cycles too, right? The pendulum swings back and forth, it seems like.
Yeah.
Where, you know, um, I would even say your mileage may vary. We're a couple of old guys, but I would even say that we became very atheistic, very I don't want to say maternalistic because that has a negative connotation, but we sort of became very atheistic, and certainly religion was just sort of it was almost like astrology. It was just sort of a amusing diversion, and that was the mindset, I'm going to say, in the 60s. And then all of a sudden, uh, people started getting very conservative again, started getting very religious again. In the 80s, the 60s and 70s, people sort of knew, with a wink and a nod that, this religion stuff, you should go to church every Sunday and whatever. But, we're doing it as a social thing. We're not really doing it because we really think there's anything to it. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, they started getting serious about it again in the 80s. So this stuff sort of goes in cycles. It dies out. It's a damped oscillation is what they would call that in physics.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm sure it will eventually die out to zero over time, but it's going to bounce back and forth a few times before it's completely gone. And I'm not
Uh,
exactly sure why that is.
yeah. I mean, I believe in religion. There is, of course, a social aspect to religious organization. People find community in a church, stuff like that.
Yep.
And while I can find community in astronomy club, um, I don't think many people can. I mean, it's not a ready-made community. It's something you need to learn. You need to get used to the people. You need to learn what makes them hot for whatever they do. And when you share that, it is community, and when you don't, it's well. I mean, churches are ready-made for that.
One of the things that when I first became an atheist, it kind of struck me. Uh, I don't watch a lot of old westerns anymore, but of course I grew up on them, and it's amazing when you become sort of aware of it and start looking for it. How many of the old westerns, whether you're talking about the TV shows or the movies, either, they would talk about their Sunday go to meeting clothes. They would go to church and sing hymns on Sunday, and that was even in the old westerns. It was portrayed as a cultural. They're hardworking farmers. They're out on the ranch breaking their back 6 days a week, and one day a week is when they get to put on their good clothes and go to church and hang out with their neighbors and maybe eat an apple pie or something. And so they look forward to it. It was the only day out of the week that they got to go and hang out with other people and just sort of enjoy
Yeah.
life. And the fact that it was couched in religion was, now, if we're talking about 1800s America, I'm sure they took it very seriously. But the fact
That's
that it was
my
couched in,
impression.
yeah, but the fact that it was couched in religion was a bonus, right? Was probably the way they looked at it. It was not necessarily the only reason they did it. It was their only social interaction back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been religious, but when I went to secondary school, I lived in a part of the country that was then still widely Roman Catholic, and religion was everywhere. But people didn't believe that. Well, some did, but my schoolmates, classmates, they didn't believe that rubbish. They went to church Sunday because they were expected to.
Right.
And
right.
Some of them even enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was as
not
much
so much
as
mass, not so much mass because that's
it was as much a social obligation as it was any other kind of obligation.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, religion was so deeply ingrained in society that when I came from the outside and hey, you're not a Catholic. At one moment, everyone notices because, of course, I don't pray, nothing like that. And then questions like, "Are you a Protestant?" No. Sometimes a clever one. "Oh, you're Jewish?" No. Huh?
Yeah.
That I mean, I rather like that kind of conversation because I, well, essentially poked the bear a bit, and it was always fun. And eventually they got it that, yeah, I'm not religious. I didn't call myself an atheist yet then, but yes.
And again, if you were growing up in the 60s and 70s and you said you weren't religious, nobody had a cow over it, you know?
No.
Now somebody would probably lose their mind if you're growing up in a neighborhood and you tell them that, at least in certain places.
Yeah.
Which we'll leave unmentioned.
I mean, in general, my nation went the other side. I mean, roughly 10 years ago, the non-religious became the majority of people. And
oh my God, I was raised Southern Baptist, so I understand that remark all too well.
Predominantly, so churches where you go to hear how awful you are and told to straighten up before you burn in hell. Oh dear.
Oh yeah, narrow is the path. Many strive, for the Lord, and few make it. So it's like, even if you try to be a good person, there's a really good chance. And Southern Baptist touted that line, and my grandmother was. I was going to say it, and it went right out of my head. Church of Christ, and there were times that. Gosh, even as a Southern Baptist, you'd look at some of these people from Church of Christ, and you'd go, man, those guys are intense. It's like, to hear them tell it, nobody's going to heaven anyway. You might as well go have a good time.
Are they Calvinist by any chance?
I think they go back to Calvinist roots for certain. And again, what's the other one that my grandmother used to quote all the time? All works are as filthy rags before the Lord. So again, it's like the message seems to be, it doesn't matter what you do, God's going to say you're shit anyway. So why are you stressing over it? I mean, that's sort of where the logic ought to go if you're going to go that route. But Calvinism, sinners in the hand of an angry God, where he uses the metaphor that God's a spider and you're stuck on a spider web, and he's dangling you over the pit, and he might just let you go just on a whim. It's like, if that God exists, he's a complete asshole. So why the hell would I want to serve him anyway?
I recognize quite a bit of that. I mean, run-of-the-mill Protestantism in the Netherlands is Calvinist. I mean, we have those few minority Protestant churches, like I mean, there are some evangelicals here, Lutherans. They're relatively small, and most of it is Calvinist. And many years ago, I dated a Jewish woman, and at one moment she wasn't Jewish culturally. She didn't believe a word of I mean, it was an atheist just to agree with me. And she remarked, you know, the God you don't believe in is the Calvinist God. And she was quite right.
Yep. I did notice a comment earlier that I wanted to say something about, and we got off on this tangent of religion. And much like other superstition, I don't like to spend all my time talking about it. I'd rather not talk about it, because it's such a waste of time.
Yeah.
But someone asked about the science you can do during an eclipse. One of the coolest stories I know in science is when Albert Einstein came up with his theory of general relativity, and Eddington, who was British, was an astronomer, did not really care for Germans because this was the World War I era. But he went and studied an eclipse in Africa at the time, and he proved Einstein's. He brought the initial proof, shall we say, of Einstein's general theory of relativity, and he did it by looking at the eclipse when the sun was blocked off, and he could see the movement of the stars behind the sun because of the bending of the light rays. And this is not something you could normally do without an eclipse blocking out the bright light of the sun, because you could never take a picture of the stars behind the sun without having that natural mask there. And so that's just one really pertinent example of what you can do during an eclipse. Now, that's in modern times, that's not what scientists tend to be focused on when they look at an eclipse. They're going to be more interested in the corona of the sun and what's going on there. So it's actually, ironically, the sun's being blotted out, and it becomes an opportunity to do a lot of really good solar physics now. But there is definitely a lot of good science that gets done during these eclipses.
Yep.
And I wanted to speak to that before we went off on any more tangents about.
Yeah, no, you're quite right. I mean, earlier online I made a remark about, let's say, the value of just watching an eclipse like this is it happens at the place and at the time that we have been knowing for decades. I don't know exactly the history of this eclipse, so it may have been 100 years, maybe 200 years, don't know. Something like that.
It is an insane amount of time in which you can make these predictions now.
Yes,
I don't.
yes.
It's not my specialty.
I mean, no, neither. I mean, I have written software to do a bit of calculation on that, which it did okay-ish, but it doesn't work as well as the stuff Astronomy uses.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be slick back in the day when I was taking astronomy, 1988, and I wrote a program that calculated the phase of the moon for my project grade in astronomy or whatever. And I got full marks for it, but it still turned out to be damn hard. There's a lot of corrections that go into those calculations.
I've read a bit about a function for the phases of the moon that has something like 30, 40 factors in it.
Yep. It's not easy to do. It's easier to do now with modern computers than ever before, but it's not easy to do. It's not simple math.
No, not at all. Anyway, it's the point of what I was trying to make and didn't make is that, I mean, if the eclipse wouldn't have happened on the second where we predicted, I would be highly distraught.
Right.
That would be weird.
That would definitely be quite the surprise if that happened.
So we predicted that with a accuracy in place and time, maybe 100 years ago. Again, I know nothing of the exact history of eclipse prediction. I mean, the ancients did it, and the ways well into modern times, the way eclipse predictions were done was essentially working out the cells.
Right.
And
Yeah. I mean,
that
in
ancient
19.
knowledge.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In 1920, whatever it was, 1925, Eddington knew about the eclipse in Africa. He
Yes.
knew that he was going to have to go to Africa to see totality. He knew what day he was going to have to be there and hope the weather was good.
Edmund Halley,
so,
printed a pamphlet with a prediction of the 1715 eclipse that
right.
just missed London.
And so they may not have known it down to the second, but they certainly knew when the eclipses were going to occur, even hundreds of years ago.
No, the pamphlet I'm talking about, oh, I should have looked it up, contains an eclipse path, as you've seen from NASA in last Monday.
Sure.
With times, length of eclipse, or length of totality, location. And modern astronomers have looked at that. He was a few seconds off and a few kilometers off. And
yes.
This was a prediction he made early 1700s.
Yep. I can believe it. And every time we have another eclipse, they use it to refine their model, right?
Yes.
So it only gets even more accurate with time.
I'm pretty sure quite a few astronomers have been watching for exact timing of the eclipse.
Okay.
Because you use that data to improve the model.
Well, and what's really fun is when you think about, and so this is where my head is right now. I actually built a watch last week just for fun. I bought a kit and built a watch. But what's even more fun about this is when you start going back hundreds of years, the fact that your timekeeping wasn't that accurate. And so the fact that you could be within seconds when you didn't even have a decent timepiece to base this on, it's like, how could you do that? Yeah, I mean, because you've got to use the previous data, to build the model to make the prediction.
Yeah.
But if your data's got all these error bars in it because your clocks aren't worth a damn, then how the hell could you ever even do that? But like you say, they managed to do it even 400 years ago.
Around 1700s, reasonably good clocks were becoming available, particularly pendulum clocks. They were pretty good.
Yep.
And I've read about that the astronomers of that time used several clocks, timed them, or what do you say that? Well, adjusted them on astronomical daily things like passage of the sun through the zenith. There were several methods they used for that. So they had reasonably good clocks, but I think it was stuff like the Harrison watch that made timekeeping for astronomy quite a bit better.
It's funny though, you talk about Harrison. That's a fascinating story. I don't know if you've ever read the book Longitude, which really highlights all of it. But the funny thing about that is, the Royal Society didn't want to pay Harrison for the prize, winning the prize, because they were absolutely certain that the winner of the prize was going to be somebody that did astronomical timekeeping and not, a mechanism, a spring mechanism that actually went tick, tick, tick. They felt like that was some sort of a monstrosity. And so they actually had, prior to Harrison's clock, right, prior to anything that we would call an accurate clock, they actually had these predictions and a big book and table of predictions about like when the moon would eclipse a certain star, or when a satellite around Jupiter would come out from behind the planet and you could see it. And they had specific moments in time when those events were supposed to occur. And that's what they hoped that the navigator on the ships could use as his method of timekeeping to navigate the ship accurately and find the right, what's the word I'm looking for? Longitude. Latitudes north and south. That's, you shoot the North Star for that one. longitude's what they had a problem with because the Earth rotated over time, right?
Yeah.
But
Essentially,
they
you
wanted to
need to
base
know
all
what
of
the
their
time is.
yeah, and so they wanted to base all of their predictions on astronomical events, even to navigate ships, and they were disappointed when it didn't work out that way. And why didn't it work out that way? We alluded to it at the very beginning. Clouds, the weather wasn't good enough for people to base their navigation on these celestial events because they never knew when they were going to be able to look up and see a night sky that was clear enough for them to see all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that 12 hours out of the day you're not going to be able to see the stars anyway.
No, in that respect, I mean, at least from observation of the sun alone, you can do reasonable positional calculations. And with a just mild, or it depends a bit on, but getting a view of the sun for navigational purposes, you don't need much visibility.
Yes.
I mean, completely clouded out, you're done for, but otherwise you'll be almost always be able to find something. I mean, to get in good position, you need to go out at night and shoot several stars.
Right.
But
so you triangulate.
Exactly.
And you have to have enough. You have to be able to see enough constellations to know that star that you're looking at is actually the star you think you're looking at.
Exactly. And even when I go out on a clear night, I need to watch a bit to recognize what I see in the sky.
Yeah, you gotta orient yourself. I mean, that would be true if you went to a different piece of land too. You'd have to look around and figure out, find some landmarks before you knew where you were.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Even if you'd been there before.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, of course, I live 52 degrees north, so I'm very much accustomed to the northern sky, and the southern sky I know next to nothing about.
But yeah, you go back. I'm marveling now. I'm not necessarily saying anything really deep, but when you go back and you think about Harrison's time, this is 1600s.
1700.
And I'm sorry, what?
Oh, he presented his work around 1715, if memory serves.
1750 or 1715?
1715.
1715. Okay.
Around that
so
time.
Early 1700s. But what I was going to point out is they already had super accurate tables, celestial tables, even prior to that. And so how they kept time to make all those observations, other than even then, it was probably 1,000-year-old science. And there were people that were making observations for all that time, and they obviously learned how to refine things. But it's really mind-boggling to think that they did all of that without any kind of modern equipment.
Yeah. I mean, Danish astronomer Tycho, he did his observation without telescopes. They weren't invented yet.
Yeah.
And he did excellent tables.
And just to bring the point home, none of that was called astrology, right? That was all astronomy.
Although I must admit that, again, around the same time, Copernicus, and I think also Tycho, did make horoscopes for fun and money.
Yes. Well, Tycho was kind of a character anyway. He was an aristocrat. He was wealthy. He had this observatory built for him by the king, and so he was always the. Pardon me.
Uraniborg, the island of Ven. It's in the Baltic.
Yes. But he was always, I don't think I'm being unfair here. I think he was always seen as a dilettante, even by most of the the historians. That because there's a story about how Copernicus had to beg him for the data.
Yeah,
And basically Tycho was just giving him a hard time, using him as slave labor
yeah,
to make observations for him while he partied. You know,
yeah,
so he was always, you know, take him with a grain of salt because he was always a bit of a dilettante, right? But Copernicus was the one that actually did all the work.
yeah. I mean,
And then was afraid to publish his work once he'd done it.
yes. I mean, as I understand it, his De Revolutionibus book was published a few weeks before he died.
Yes. And again, he was worried about retribution from the Catholic Church. So he just didn't even want to publish his results, which of course I kind of like Galileo's approach over Copernicus's on that one. But he did the work. He worked hard. It's sad that he didn't really get any real credit for it until after he was dead. You know,
Yeah,
but he obviously did what he wanted to do the way he wanted to do it, and he was happy with the fact that he wasn't recognized until after he was dead. So that's what he wanted. He was a smart
yeah,
enough man to do things whatever ways he wanted to have them done.
yeah. And find sponsors for his research and eventually get it published. I mean, it's a bit difficult to not see an early scientist in him. Which I mean, for astronomy, he certainly was.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the same science we do today.
No, that's true.
And I mean, I'm an astronomer, really love the naked eye observation. But I'm well aware that that's not where modern astronomy, is happening. It's still a part of it.
It's one of these things where we're a victim of our own success. This might seem like a completely tangential remark, but um, I'm at the university, right? And yesterday I was teaching the recruiters a class about engineering, and I was teaching them specifically electrical engineering. And so I'm trying to get them excited so that they can recruit more engineers. So basically, so our engineering department doesn't die because nobody's interested in engineering anymore. And I'm giving them these little electronics kits with transistors and diodes and this kind of stuff. And I'm showing them how to read a schematic. And the one lady says, "This is fun. Is this what you teach your students?" And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Why?" I said, "Well, when you come to I said, first of all, when I was 14, I was doing this stuff when I was like 14 for fun. I get the Radio Shack kits and do this stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
I'm
I
aware
was
of
doing
that.
this for fun. I was doing it for free. And so historically, when you come to college, you get taught the math and you get taught the theory and you get taught the more rigorous stuff. And you don't really have time to just sit down with the breadboard and play with it. And so then she says, "Well, will they do this when they get a job?" And I'm like, "No."
Probably not.
Because and the problem is that it's all been done. And so now I can finally make the point I was going to make with that story, which is the same thing is true with observational astronomy. At least the kind of observational astronomy we're talking about right now is it's all been done. It's great to go out in your backyard and look at this stuff and marvel at it, but you're not going to find something that somebody didn't find 1,000 years ago already, when they had better
Yeah.
skies to look at and were much more motivated to find something new.
I've been on a few of those, about occultations of stars by asteroids.
Mm.
using many people spread on a long stretch, timing the occupation, the occultation, you can learn something about the shape of the asteroid.
My
I've
understanding is
done
the
that.
Japanese are really crazy about this. This is a big hobby with them.
Yes. I've been on a few of those expeditions where you need to be on a very specific place, which, by the way, was interesting in the 1970s and 80s without GPS.
It sounds like fun. I'd love to have been on
It was,
something like that.
yes. And several times it didn't work out because we were clouded out, but also a few hits. And then years later, some bloke wrote a paper on it, and deep down in the note there's a thank you to my astronomy club.
Were you mentioned by name?
No.
Oh, that's a shame.
But my astronomy club was mentioned by name.
Well, that's good. I mean, so
Yes.
that's fun.
Yes. And I mean, weirdly enough, citizen science is still possible in astronomy. During my life, discovery of comets was very much a amateur thing.
Yep. Was it Hale Bopp that an amateur discovered? Yeah. It can still happen, but if and I certainly don't want to but it's a labor of love, and I certainly don't want to discourage anybody from doing it, whether it's playing with electronics or looking at the night sky, right? It's but I think you have to do it with the attitude that you're probably not going to do anything new. You're doing it to have fun, right? And it's a wonderful bonus if you actually come up with something new and different that nobody else has discovered before you. Because the more people that get involved in it, the odds of you finding something are just going to go down, in inverse proportion to the number of people that have already done it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm very excited about James Webb, and before that, the Hubble Space Telescope. I mean, not just excellent science, but also stunning pictures.
There's a lot of things, and they do tend to be space related. There's a lot of things that I thought I'd never live to see. I thought I'd never live to see an actual picture of a black hole.
Yeah.
With the accretion disk, and all that. I certainly would have never expected to see an actual picture of a black hole from another galaxy.
No.
Something similar but different, since I said space science and not astronomy, is I never thought I'd live to see a rocket fall out of the sky and land on its ass straight up. And we can thank Mr. Musk for that. I'm still not quite sure if his model of reusable rockets is as valid as he likes to think it is, but that was still a neat trick to watch a rocket fall out of the sky and fire its engines and land on its butt. On a barge, not just on a piece of land, on a barge out in the middle of the ocean. It's like that's really
damn good engineering.
Yeah,
and it definitely catches the eye. But I mean, my idea is that catching the eye is more his goal than doing an efficient rocketry job.
Yep. And so James Webb, it's already. I need to do a presentation on that for one of the conventions or something, because James Webb is, lo and behold, already discovering, physics that we didn't know. So it's like just as soon as your instrumentation gets better, you always find something that you'd never even suspected until you went and looked for it. And so, that's, if anybody, and again, I don't expect this audience to have this attitude, but if anybody ever wonders why we spend so much money on science, it's because every time we make the science better, we learn something new. And every time we learn something new, we get smarter as a race and we do more and more impressive things. And so anybody that's missing the point on that, I just don't even know what to say to them, you know?
Yeah. I've been a big fan of what NASA's been doing ever since the 1960s. I mean, I've seen the moon landings happen on TV, and
Yep.
I've been following space flight ever since. And I mean, there are a few absolute high points there. Of course, Voyager, damn that good.
Yep. And James Webb, it's definitely it has brought back some beautiful imagery. You know, and it's again, it's things that I never thought I'd live to see, and it's happened in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So you know, it's really it's great that that kind of stuff still occurs. We tend to forget, you know, we tend to think that, you know, things don't progress. And it's funny because, you know, we live in a world where progress happens in so many ways. None of us can keep track of it. I mean, now everybody's all excited about AI. It's like, I kind of did the AI thing in the 80s. It's hard for me to get excited about it again, even though it's going to be much better this time around.
Yeah.
You know, but I made a study of that, you know, decades ago, and I'm kind of having a hard time getting too excited about it now.
Yeah. I think it's a bit of a fact, but I may be wrong. I mean, the bit that I'm a bit worried about is essentially by throwing lots and lots and lots of memory and computer cycles at it, you get something that makes sense, sort of. Well, AI graphic thingies can't count fingers yet.
Yeah. But it's,
Uh,
but I mean, isn't that what the human brain does? I mean, we
no,
have lots and lots
no,
of memory, and
but that's
did you?
not how our intelligence, whatever that exactly is, does.
You don't think so?
No. I mean, it's definitely part of it, and it definitely when people have seen a lot of pictures of what they're studying, they get better ideas and hypotheses of how it works.
Right.
But I mean, just ordinary intelligence, not particularly scientific study, but just observe, think what is going on here. It's a talent we all have.
I'm
But
sorry, I didn't hear that last thing you said.
it's a talent we all have.
Yeah.
Just what's going on here.
I think
Um,
it's, I personally think that it's going to, you know, people get into these long-winded philosophical arguments about what's
mhm,
consciousness and what's intelligence.
yeah,
Um,
I'm not fond of that, but yeah,
I definitely think we're setting ourselves up to be humbled again. Just like we thought, you know, the stars were heaven was beyond the stars, and the firmament was just, you know, the stars were nothing but holes in the firmament with heaven shining through. And suddenly we realized that the universe was much larger than we ever imagined, and we're not at the center of it. I think we're going to sort of come into some conclusions like that with AI as well. We think consciousness is special. We think intelligence in the human race is special. But what we're going to find is if you allocate enough resources and give something enough time to learn, that you can, we're not special there either.
no. Anyway, we're running around an hour now. Before we round up this conversation, I want to say a big thank you to our patrons, Eric Ozols, Rion, Deneen Murphy, Dandy, Michael Wiseman, Cindy Plaza, Sonny Shell, Aaron Coalson, Phil Calderone, Amanda McLeod and Logan Fisher, thank you for your contributions. I love the conversation. I want to impress on our viewers that if you're at night, you have a clear sky, look at the stars. They're wonderful. And
Absolutely.
we know very, very much more about them than what you can see. And I mean, I love astronomy because it's just a fabulous sight. A dark sky, watching thousands of stars and bits
Yep.
of. I can name quite a bit of that. That's quite a bit of the fascination, but you can even enjoy that quite a bit without that knowledge.
Do we have time for one more story?
Yeah, certainly.
So when I was in college, I went to you guys know this now. I went to a Southern Baptist college in middle of Tennessee. It's in the middle of nowhere. And I decided that I wanted to learn physics. I decided physics was my thing. And the point of that was to say that when I talked to my physics professor at that university, he said, well, you're going to have to transfer because we don't offer a physics major here. So I transferred to a different college back in Memphis where I grew up that offered a physics major. And I lost all of my credits from the previous university, except for the fact that they counted them as electives. And so I had to take all of the core classes again. And so I had gotten through my entire college career without ever taking a class just for the fun of it. Because by the time I'd done the core work twice and done my physics major and my math minor, I didn't have any left over to do anything else. So finally, my last term, I said, fuck, I am going to take one class just for the fun of it, just because I want to take it. And so my last term as an undergraduate, I took astronomy because you don't have to take astronomy as a physics major. At least back then you didn't have to. And I took astronomy for the fun of it. And that was the most fun I had in college, my entire college career. And it had a bigger impact on my overall career, particularly as a teacher, because when I went to Notre Dame as a grad student, literally they had us all in a big room. And the first thing the guy asked when he walked in the big room of new graduate students was, has any of you had astronomy? I'm the only hand in the room that goes up, right? So then I become the astronomy TA. And then my first teaching job, the first thing they asked me at the staff meeting was, how do you feel about astronomy? We don't have a good astronomy teacher here. Because again, the physicists were teaching astronomy, right? And it's like, yeah, I can do that for you. I can handle that for you. So I literally became the astronomy teacher, and I still, we don't teach that at ECPI where I work now, but I did actually take an adjunct position just to teach astronomy a couple of years back, just for fun. And so you could very arguably say that 1 3-hour class had more impact on my overall career than anything else I ever did professionally. And I love it. I mean, I still go out in my own backyard and look at the stars myself, and I love talking about it.
Yeah.
So it is as fun as science gets. And I am pushing even now for the university to let me teach astronomy where I am, even though it's an engineering school and it's a nursing college. If you're wondering why the engineering program's dying, we're all getting nurses now. But it's their specialty has nothing to do with astronomy, but I'm still pushing to teach it because it teaches so much basic science and simple observation and just understanding the universe that you live in. And that's what a good education's about, right? Is understanding your place in the universe.
I mean, so, in Dutch schools, astronomy is, secondary schools, astronomy is not ordinarily taught. It is taught as an elective in some schools.
Yep.
And I think that's a bit of a miss.
Oh, it's a huge miss. You know, I have these engineering students now that think they're going to do engineering and they don't know math, and so you spend
Oh,
a whole lot of you spend a whole lot of time trying to teach them about mega, you know, giga, tera, you know, prefixes. You spend a whole lot of time trying to teach them simple geometry, uh, simple observations, that kind of
yeah,
thing, and then the simple algebra behind it, and all of that could be offloaded into a nice astronomy class where they could have
yeah,
fun with it and really get an appreciation for it. And then
yeah,
when they came to learn electrical circuits from me a term later, there's about a week and a half's worth of work we could just skip, uh, because they'd already understand units and they'd already understand prefixes. They'd already understand how to draw a diagram and figure something out
yeah,
geometrically.
yeah.
Um, and so it has a lot of value as an actual core course. It has a lot of value, and I don't understand why so many administrators don't seem to understand that, other than they haven't had astronomy themselves.
Presumably, I mean, I know that. I mean, I've tried to show people around me what I can do with astronomy, kind of observations I do, the instruments I have, the camera helps, stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I mean, they like the pretty pictures, but making those pretty pictures is apparently not so attractive. And that's the bit I love.
Right. You're a
So that,
technician at heart.
yes,
Yeah. Not everybody's a technician. Not every scientist is a technician. And so
certainly. No.
it's
I
it's
mean,
it's great that you like it, but you know, try to be forgiving of the ones that don't like it, right?
no. I'm not blaming them for that, but it's difficult to transfer that appreciation.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been a photographer from age 10. I've been reading astronomy since I could read. And it's always been with me. And it's one of the things that it's a joy forever and it has
Yeah.
practical applications as well.
Well, you told me you were a photographer within the first minute of when we started talking when you said you took that picture yourself.
Yeah,
That's not a picture you get without knowing how to do photography.
no,
So I knew that about you early on.
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's one of the things, I mean, in hindsight, maybe I should have studied astronomy at uni, but well, I studied sociology at uni, which is something
Yeah.
completely different.
Well, and you know, you've there's so many things that you're trying to optimize when you're
Yeah,
18 years old and you're trying to figure out what your career is going to be. You know, you want to have fun when you're at the university. You want
yes,
to learn things that enlighten you, but you've also got to pick a career path that hopefully will make you a good living so that you can enjoy the rest of your life when you get out 4 years later. And
exactly.
unfortunately, it's a hard optimization problem for everyone to solve, particularly at 18 years old.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so
I'm not feeling bad about that. I mean, I made choices that I made. I did what I did. I got a degree in sociology. Never used it today. Got into computer
mm,
programming.
right.
And
But
yes,
yeah,
I am much more an engineer than a scientist.
but yeah, if you ask me, you know, if anybody were to ask me, and I might be a little biased. I mean, I admit that, you know, right up front, but I think everybody should use one of their elective credits to take astronomy. because it's, to me, it's that much fun. It's
Yes.
not fun for everybody, but it's hard to find somebody that doesn't love a good astronomy class.
Yeah.
Usually people get really up for taking an astronomy class. Even if they're like the astronomy class I taught a couple years back at the other university in town was mostly education students, right? They had to have a 3-hour science credit, or we actually offered 2 semesters, so they might have had to have 6 or 8 hours, because we had a lab component too. But they had to have X number of hours of science credit to be a teacher, and they thought astronomy was the easy way out, as opposed to taking physics, or some
Yeah.
other, or biology or something. I made sure that we had fun, but I made sure it wasn't the easy way out for them.
No, quite right. I think it's about time to wrap up the show. We're running an hour and 10 minutes. Thank you for your contribution. I much enjoyed our conversation. Thank you,
Hopefully we
our
could do it
viewers.
again.
Yeah, and clear skies.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.